Okay, we had a mixed bag today. The Dow was up, the S&P was flat, the Nasdaq was down, Russell was down. The Dow was up 47 points. Again, we're just under that 44,000 area. We'll see if we test it again. The S&P is just below 6,000. 59.85. Again, I believe the S&P will go again to that mid 6,000 area or just under it, and as high as into the 6,100 range as my target level, because that is the trend line in the monthly time frame. But the S&P 500 was flat today. It was up just 1 point. The Nasdaq was down just over 0.25%. The Russell was down almost 1%. The VIX was down 4.69% to 14. We have NVIDIA earnings next Wednesday, 1 week from now. We had the consumer price index. It was initially a sigh of relief because there was concerns it was going to start ticking back up. So initially we got a rally, sold off, and then again the S&P pretty much closed flat, a point there. But the month-over-month number came in right in line with expectations, 0.2%. Core, 0.3%, right in line with expectations there. The year-over-year headline number, 2.6, still higher than 2.4, but in line with expectations. And the year-over-year core number, 3.3, which was what it was the previous reading, and again, right in line with expectations. We'll get the wholesale inflation tomorrow before the market opens, the PPI, and then we'll get the Fed. I should say we'll get Powell speaking tomorrow during the market session. 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So towards the end of the session, Powell will be speaking. Get retail sales on Friday before the market opens. Again, next week, NVIDIA earnings. P got a candle of indecision in the form of a doji. Momentum is still bullish. I told you about the bullish buy signal here. I told you momentum was bearish right before the election results, but again, bullish divergences and bouncing off that 50-period moving average, we're likely going to get a presidential election rally. Here, again, we still might form a divergence with momentum here in the daily time frame. There's no topping signal yet at all on the S&P, and we could still rise and reach my target. Still may, again, come down and get a larger divergence developing here in the daily time frame with momentum. Again, not enough evidence to say that the pullback is done yet. I'll be watching for clues. I think one of the catalysts could be, as I said yesterday, the inflation data, Fed Chair Powell speaking on Thursday, maybe NVIDIA earnings next week, even the retail sales come Friday. But again, got to be looking for my objective target level to be reached. If we do get an immediate rally, then maybe the pullback here is done. But again, not enough evidence that the pullback is done yet. Momentum and trend signals remain bullish. Signals remain bullish. Again, I think we could still reach my objective target level. Intraday signals remain bullish. S&P 500. Again, intraday, we could be forming a larger bullish divergence in the RSI. Momentum and the trend still bullish here in the intraday time frame. Signal still bullish here. Intraday, again, well, the pullback is not done yet. Whenever it finishes, we're likely going to make new all-time highs and reach my objective target. Signals have done a very good job in marking the short-term swing moves. Currently, again, my signals are still bullish intraday, bullish in the daily time frame, with momentum and the trend. They're going to reach my target level or maybe even overthrow it and go to 6,100. Like the chart, you like the indicators, please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. The chart, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. Please let me know that you like the charts, like the indicators by supporting the channel today. I thank you for your consideration for that. Today on the S&P 500, initially tried to rally, futures did, and the S&P, and then we sold off, testing the previous day's low. We rallied back up, getting a bottoming tail on the 5-minute chart. And again, I told you to be watching the 200-period moving average. Got back above it. Back to this overhead resistance. We stalled. We broke this trend line, and then we threw back towards the trend line, back below the 200, tried to get above it again and stalled at the 50. As the 50 got above the 200, and then again turning back down. So I'm going to rally with the PPI or with Powell tomorrow. Got to get back above the 200, and stay above it to go challenge those highs. And then again, the 50's got to stay above it. So again, the 5-minute chart, just short-term price action there. I drew this out for you the other day. I told you again, before the sell-off happened right here, I told you we were at extremes with the Class B diversions right here, that we're going to sell off and correct. I thought we had moved to new highs and reached my objective target level. Again, like I said yesterday, that pullback may or may not be done. I told you the catalyst, the inflation data, the inflation reports. It may be Powell on Thursday when he speaks, or possibly the NVIDIA earnings, maybe even retail sales. But I told you again to be watching. Do we get a shallow pullback or do we get a deeper pullback? Again, to gap support, or maybe fill the gap fill here to the 50-period moving average, these levels. Again, he got above the 200 on the 5-minute chart. Do we get another higher low and then try to rally, or does this thing fail? We'll be watching the PPI inflation data and Powell tomorrow. But I told you the different catalysts, but I do believe we're going to go make new highs. Do we get a divergence, a triple divergence in all likelihood, happen over a few days, or can drag out? I believe a divergence is likely going to carry the S&P to my target level, the high end of my target level. Again, the mid 6,000 area, even overthrow it and hit the 6,100 area. As I said, we could hit that 6,000 to 6,100 area. Already passed the low end of the target level at 57.50. These are the trend lines in the monthly time frame that I've talked about at great length and detail. And I think a larger divergence is likely going to form here. We already had this Class B. We're getting a pullback. Maybe it's done, maybe it's not. But again, some pretty amazing calls on this 60-minute chart. These extremes, again, called the top in July. Didn't catch the bottom in August, but got it with the higher low, higher high, moving above the 50 period here. Predicted the sell-off. Predicted that we were going to rebound back up, call the top here correctly, call the pullback, again, the divergence, and then the extreme. Again, called the bottom there with the jobs report, told you we rally with the inflation data, called for a Fed pivot rally all the time, calling for a Fed pivot rally to new all-time highs. Broke out, told you with this we were going to correct, but it was a back test of the breakout of the trend line and the triangle that we have an upward resolution. We hadn't hit the NASDAQ target yet. We did over here. I told you, but S&P hit that target. I told you we could see an upward resolution of the triangle if we didn't turn down and get a and fall through to the downside. We never got it. Trend line, we got confirmation. We never got a fall through. Key support held. Told you about this divergence and the rally. Told you about this bearish divergence in here. So I've made some pretty amazing calls. I've not been perfect. Triangle can break either way, but I told you I have the guts to tell you what I think. I told you I thought it would break up. I was wrong about that, but it broke down. Then I told you I thought we had a bottom here. I was right about that. We're at the 50 period here. Quite capture the bottom here, but got it with the higher low and higher high when my signals turned back to bullish. But made called some of the exact tops over here and exact bottoms. Even with the triangle, I called the bottom with the higher low that's set up. Pretty stinking amazing calls. I've not been perfect. The signals calling the short-term price fluctuations up and down. We could rally back up over here, get a presidential rally, and still go back and backtest the trend lines, move to new highs, or even overthrow them and reach the target level in the monthly time frame, that mid 6,000 area. So it's just under the mid 6,000 area. We may even overthrow it and go to 6,100. Absolutely amazing calls. Perfect, but pretty amazing. We're going to, again, complete a blow-off top. The S&P was hitting key horizontal support at the 50-period moving average, and I told you again we can go back and backtest these trend lines or even try to get back above them and reach the trend line in the monthly time frame. If we tried to backtest, we could move to new all-time highs. There was no evidence that a top was in here. I talked about that at great length and detail. We're still forming a potential divergence. It could still be under construction. We may, again, catalyst the inflation data, Powell speaking, maybe the retail sales on Friday, or, again, NVIDIA earnings next week that will take us to the target level. I think we're about to finish this. This rising wedge failing to get a follow-through confirmation follow-through move to the downside, bouncing off support. We now have a larger rising wedge on that weekly chart, as I've been talking about. Get a candle of indecision today in the form of a doji. Go to the monthly trend line. Again, I talked about, again, going up to this upper channel, May even overthrow the trend line in the monthly time frame, but I think that the divergences will complete. We're forming this larger rising wedge. This trend line right here, it's intersecting with this trend line right here. In reverse, you want to be watching for the RSI to drop back below 50 and for price on the S&P to drop back below the 20-week moving average and break this trend line that slightly moved on me. See, these divergences in the past have produced major reversals. This one will likely do the same. Last Class B diversions we had gave us nearly a 10% sell-off in July. This one will, Class B or Class A diversions will likely produce a reversal. I talked about this trend line right here that told you we may even go, we'd go back to it, even overthrow it, go towards that trend line in the monthly time frame. We overthrew it. So again, we closed above it. So I redrew the trend line. These highs over here, including the shadow right here. And again, the blue channel is now in play, and that's directly overhead. S&P will likely come up into this trend line in the monthly time frame and reverse. We are directly below it. We may overthrow it and hit the 61 area. That's why I'm saying the 6,000 to 6,100 area is the high end of the target. The low end of the target, we've already moved above it. We're likely going to get a blow-off top here. This move that we've had rising towards it, it's what I believe is a blow-off top move here, and we'll probably see a topping tail in the monthly time frame. It's where the market just goes parabolic, which is we've seen. See here in the monthly time frame up close, again, we're directly below this trend line. Again, likely a blow-off top move here, and we'll probably see a topping tail or some type of reversal pattern. If we turn off of this trend line here, a reversal for the month ends. P is going to top in 2024. This is just under the mid 6,000 area. Maybe we overthrow it and go into the 6,100 range. We'll see what happens. But I think you're going to get a turn in this area. I think you're still going to go make a new all-time high and reach it. Monthly time frame, we had a 13 followed by a 9. I told you the 9 perfected signal. 8 bar was a high of the count. Sometimes you get the 9 count completing and you turn immediately. Other times you go a little bit higher and then you turn. That's what's likely happening here. Over here we had a 9 count. We went a little bit higher and then we got the sell-off in 2022 of 27.5%. This will likely lead to a reversal. You're having this in the monthly time frame. And again, this bar right here, it could be a topping tail before the month ends. Close strong and we get something like this where we start a reversal bar on into December. We'll see how it unfolds, but I think you got a pretty good shot. Form those negative divergences on the 60-minute charts. I'm up into this area and see those divergences begin to play out. And that will start off in the daily time frame that will eventually spill over into the weekly time frame. Close to my target level, we've hit the lower end of the target level, this red line right here. We hit that. That again, enough evidence for that peak. The set up before the presidential election on the 60-minute chart. Divergences. The holding of the 50 period at support in the daily. Again, we're now here near my target. I'm looking for a topping process to complete here. Again, we overthrow this level a little bit. Maybe we don't. Maybe we tag it. Guess is that we're not going to fall short of it because we've already blown through the other target level. And again, this is a nearly 100-year-old trend line. I think you're going to reach it or overthrow it. I think you're going to reverse. I'm saying we may move above 6,000 into the 6,100 level and overthrow this level a bit. It's done. Again, we're going to enter in a recession. A lot of people saying, oh, we're not going to have a recession. We're going to have a recession. Recession indicators are already flashing. Okay, we got a really nice looking channel on the Dow here. We're kind of stalling here. And again, multiple point divergences. It's very large divergence on the MACD. Dow just overthrowing a 125-year-old trend line. Monthly time frame. It's the weekly chart. Divergences are about to play out. And NASDAQ formed a divergence here. We sold off. But again, we broke this trend line right here. There was no confirmation and follow through. I talked about that at the time. There was no evidence that the top was in, as I talked about with the S&P and NASDAQ. We talked about the divergence right here between the S&P and NASDAQ, which again was suggesting a rally off of our 50-period moving average. Talked about that. We came back up. I told you to be watching these trend lines. So far, we've stalled at this one. Now, again, a rising wedge, a larger rising wedge is still in play here. But again, rising wedges, you can overthrow it very easily. We're still underneath, just directly underneath that trend line in the monthly time frame. a fraction under, very close to the one in the weekly time frame. We're just pretty much right at it, slightly under it by a fraction in the weekly time frame. So again, watching this, we got a doji. Again, do we go higher? Or do we get a pullback, come back and hit gap resistance or fill the gap and then try to go higher? But again, I think we'll move to a new high. NASDAQ may diverge with it. If this peak can hold, which again, there's not enough evidence that NASDAQ has topped yet, it can still reach the monthly trend line, which it's directly below it. Watching the indicators here, again, in the weekly chart of NVIDIA, we're going into earnings next week. Watching the weekly chart of the NASDAQ, you got a possible divergence here. It may not be done. We still may go higher and then reversal with NVIDIA or something like that. Still may go higher above this level. I've just connected the dots with the peak that we had last week. Got a multiple point. You got a triple divergence developing in the weekly time frame. Tech falls NVIDIA. I drew these a few days ago, told you we could get a divergence. NASDAQ may diverge with the S&P and end up getting a lower high, though. That's still possible. Sometimes they do. They did at the July top. They did over here at the November bottom just ahead of the election. They diverged. We got a higher low at NASDAQ. I talked about that. That's why I told you I thought we'd get a presidential election rally, maybe one on with the Fed as well. I'm looking for the S&P to reach my target level. Again, going to be watching possibly a breakout of a bull flag here, but we threw back into the trading range of the pattern. So again, not enough evidence that the bottom is in yet here. We're going to be watching to see get that evidence tomorrow. Hard to see on this chart, but we're just directly under this trend line just by a fraction right here. Again, still may overthrow this level, as I've said. We may turn off of it. But the divergence is in play right now on the RSI. Again, this is a channel going back to the pandemic low. Again, we have a larger channel going back into the 1980s. Divergence going on in the most recent price action on the MACD. Actually going to be looking for a turn in this area. We still may go a little higher. Going to be looking for a turn in these divergences to begin to play out. And that could happen before the month of November ends. The month is still young.